Of the minutes of July 20th, 2021. Moved by Councillor Mitchell, seconded by Councillor Musa. All in favor? All right, motion carries. First up, we have Scott Blois, Discharge Development Agreement Report, and be Debbie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So SB Automotive Repairs Limited Discharge Agreement. So an application has been received from SB Automotive Repairs Limited to discharge 2 existing development agreements and an unsubstantial amendment for lands located at 485 Highway 2 Enfield. The applicant wishes to have the property regulated by the Mixed Use Center MC Zone provisions of the Land Use Bylaw. The existing agreements permitted development of a retail building supply store, a fitness center to be located in the existing building, an auto detailing business, and permitted industrial commercial C5 zone uses identified under the 2000 East Hants Land Use Bylaw. None of the uses identified by the existing agreements are currently taking place on the subject lands. So it's located at 485 Highway 2 in Enfield, as you can see here. The area is approximately 0.55 hectares with 65 meters of frontage on Highway 2. It's zoned Mixed Use Center MC Zone, and the 2 properties, adjacent properties, are also zoned Mixed Use Center. The rail line runs in back of the subject lands, and across this Highway 2, there is an R3 zoned property with an apartment building on it, and a Mixed Use Center zone that has the daycare on it. So again, the purpose is to discharge the existing agreement so that the subject property may be regulated by the provisions of the bylaw. So all the existing uses taking place at 485 Highway 2 currently are permitted in the Mixed Use Center zone. By discharging the agreements, the land uses would not become non-conforming, so they'd be legally conforming uses. However, the ground sign would become a legal non-conforming sign, as the size would not be permitted under the current sign provisions for the MC zone. And the reason the applicant is doing this is to allow for auto parts retail store on the subject property, so that would be an additional building. And that would be, retailers are permitted in the MC zone by site plan approval, so they would have to go through the site plan approval process. In conclusion, planning staff have reviewed the application by SB Automotive Repairs Limited based on the applicable policies contained in the Municipal Planning Strategy, Municipal Government Act, and the existing development agreements, and have determined that the request to discharge the agreements is appropriate. Therefore, staff recommend that the 2 existing development agreements and the 1 unsubstantial development agreement amendment identified by the numbers above here be discharged. In doing so, the property would be regulated by the provisions of the Land Use Bylaw. And again, the recommendation is that the discharge agreement be approved. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Debbie. Any discussion on this? Somebody move the recommended motion. Councillor Hay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move the recommendation as presented.
Seconded by Councillor Mitchell. And discussion. Seeing none, looking for the question. Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. Next up, we have Salvage Yards background report for plan update. Debbie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, this is part of our plan update background reports for Planning Advisory Committee to consider. So under the current provisions of the East Hants Official Community Plan, salvage yards are only permitted in the rural use RU zone and the industrial commercial IC zone by development agreement. According to Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change, there are 3 salvage yards that are in operation in the future planned area of East Hants. I know there's more in the Grand area, but in the future planned area, according to Nova Scotia Environment, there's only 3 operating. These salvage yards have been identified below with the associated PIDs and a satellite image from Viewpoint. And so we have Jeff Miller Auto Parts Limited, and so they have 2 PIDs here. One's 35 acres and the other one's 80 acres. And then we have WD Lawrence Auto Salvage Limited. And there's 3 properties, or 4 properties there, and that's 180 acres. And then we have Country Hills Auto Sales and Recycled Parts, and that's 1 property. Under the current provisions of the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw, salvage yards may only be considered by development agreement in the rural use and industrial commercial zone. With the extension of land use regulations to the future planned portion of East Hants, regulations for salvage yards have to be considered in the area. Staff recommend that new salvage yards located in the future planned area also be considered by development agreement. So we're not saying that the underlying zone would be rural use or ISO, but it's just the way that they be regulated is by development agreement, and those would be for new ones. So salvage yards have the potential to cause land use conflicts with neighboring land uses. In addition, public engagement on the location of a salvage yard is an important part of the development of such intensive land uses. Issues that could be considered via development agreement application are unsightliness of a property, buffering, fencing, noise, setbacks, hours of operation, and signage. For the 3 existing salvage yards that are currently in operation in the future planned area, amendments would be added to the plan that would allow these facilities to continue to operate legally, and a development agreement would only be required if the facilities were to increase in size beyond the current property boundaries. So again, if, for example, WD Lawrence went beyond that 180 acres. So right now, they don't take anywhere up to 180 acres. I think they only maybe 1/3 of that, if that. So they would have that full extent to develop with. Same with the Jeff Miller Auto Parts. They have the 2 properties there that they're currently using. Country Hills Estates, the same. They could go to the property boundaries. Planning staff believe that the proposed method of regulation is fair and is in line with regulations that are applicable to salvage yards in operation in the comprehensive plan portion of East Hants. The land use bylaw definition for salvage and scrap yards are similar. So this is just, we're also proposing changes to the definitions of salvage and scrap yards, and this would be applicable to the current definitions. So we have 2 definitions, one salvage yard and one scrap yard. In order to be more in line with the definition used by Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change, and to ensure there's no overlap in our own regulations, staff are recommending the definition for salvage yard and scrap yard be combined for one definition of salvage yard. Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change does not use the term scrap yard in their publications. Therefore, staff are proposing the following: salvage yard definition replaces the existing definition, and the definition of scrap yard is deleted. And the scrap yard definition is in my staff report, but it talks about bone scraps and waste paper and stuff like that. And we already have 2 other definitions that handle that. And so we have the definition for waste recovery, so that would be recycling those materials. And then also we have a bylaw for waste management, and they say that you can't have another landfill unless in that. So the salvage yard definition means a premise where used bodies or parts of automobiles or used bodies or parts of other vehicles or machinery, industrial equipment are placed or stored or kept. So the recommendation is to authorize staff to begin preparing land use policies and regulations for salvage yards located in the future planned area based on the direction identified in staff's report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Warden Rolston.
Thank you. I'll be upfront. This concerns me to see this here today because we have not yet determined what zone might be in place in the unplanned area. It might be rural use. It might be the other one there, industrial commercial. It might be an entirely new zone. So until we know what type of zoning we're going to be putting there, I think we're putting the cart before the horse and saying that existing salvage yards that are there today will have to have a development agreement to expand. Because whatever zoning is in place in the area, it may be zoned something that would allow them to expand. So I have a bit of a problem with it because until we know what the base zoning's going to look like, I don't know how we can decide if we're going to require these folks to have a development agreement or not. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Councilor Head.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The 3 that's outlined there, they're already salvage yards now. I mean, the environment regulations are already down as a salvage yard. And I'm just going to throw something, and I use myself as an example. Let's say I was into farm machinery, and I would buy different aspects of farm machinery stored on my property to be used for machinery that I repair or fix up or whatever it may be. And would be something that would be considered a salvage yard?
Mr. Chair, it would have to meet the definition of salvage yard. So salvage yard means a premise where used bodies and parts of automobiles or used bodies or parts of other vehicles, machinery, or industrial equipment are placed or stored or kept. And I mean, we understand that people who do mechanical work also store some of these equipment as well. So in that case, if you're fixing up and repairing vehicles, it would be considered a repair or maintenance use. If you're taking and keeping those bodies and not repairing them, you're sending them out to people who repair them, then we consider that a salvage yard. So it's really in how you're using the property and how you're storing the equipment and what it's being used for in the end.
Yeah, and I know there's probably maybe several that come into this thing here, but what I'm saying is that some of these, let's say, equipment that I buy, I may keep it for years because I don't know what I'm going to bring in. I'm going to have parts of it, so I could have 10 or 15 vehicles, maybe even 20 apparatuses on my property, and if it's not interfering or anything like that, I wouldn't consider that being a salvage yard. Now, if I was selling parts and off like that, people coming and going and all the time, to me, that would be considered a salvage yard. Not saying I wouldn't sell a part, but I'm not advertising to sell parts. You know, I mean, this is the way thing it is. And I think there may be a number of people out there that would fall under that. And I know it's going to be a concern for them if they have to go down and put in a development agreement just to continue what they're already doing. And I don't think their neighbors, I'm just assuming now, may not have complained because they've been there for years, you know. So, and as the warden mentioned, maybe we have to come up with a separate zoning for something like that. I don't know. I'm just putting that out there because I think we're going to find there's going to be a lot of people in that situation that a lot of times you can't see this from the main road. It's in behind their house or somewhere, you know, and you don't even know this is going on. So I think this is something we really have to consider in this salvage yard thing. Thank you.
For the horse. I don't understand why this is here now. We haven't even done zoning, but this is here. Like, to me, I agree with the word. This is not right. But anyway, the question is, I have people out there who are supplementing their income and running around and doing a service for the municipality by picking up old cars. They're not selling parts off them. They're storing them there, cleaning people's yards up, taking them, storing them in one place. When the price of steel's up and the crusher's around, they come and the crusher comes in. They look after the fluids or whatever. So are they going to be considered a salvage yard? I have a person in my district who is an old car collector, thousands of old cars, keeps a lot of old parts around, doesn't sell any of them, just use it for his own use. Is that going to be considered a salvage yard? This is just the wrong time to try to be deciding this when we haven't even got planning in there yet. And I'm hoping that maybe our new MLA can get this changed for the rural area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. If it helps, what we can do is add it to the definition as defined by Nova Scotia Environment, because if you're a true salvage yard, you do have to meet the regulations as Nova Scotia Environment. So if that helps, we can add that to it, and that would take those smaller people that just have maybe a small amount of vehicles on site that are doing it for personal use, that are a collector of cars, and that way we don't consider them as a salvage yard as what Nova Scotia would classify them as. So that may help in that direction. And as for, I'd just like to say, as for the planning, it's just, right now, it's just a direction. It's not, we're not looking at making the regulations right now. It's just a direction of what direction you'd like staff to consider salvage yards. If you don't like the direction, that's okay too. You can tell us to go in another direction, that's fine as well. And John might want to follow that up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just to follow up on that, the intention is certainly not to force people into a development agreement that are simply tinkering with their own farm machinery, or if they collect cars themselves, that kind of thing. That's not what we're trying to capture. We're trying to capture these big auto salvage yards. Everyone knows what I mean by that, a place where you go and buy parts off old cars and where they disassemble them and crush them and all that kind of stuff. As for it being premature, it's difficult to So we intended to bring a number of background reports to you this fall, and that was in our original proposal, to start talking about a number of different land use issues and then start the public consultation process. This we highlighted as one of those issues simply because it is kind of one of those issues that draws people's attentions. It's one that we regulate differently in the currently planned area, just because of that interest that people have in them. And not presupposing what zoning will happen in this area, but whatever zone is there, I guess our recommendation is that you would still want to deal with new salvage yards or expanded salvage yards by development agreement. So that's really all we're saying. Without having, and although Debbie had a definition there, that was our first crack at it. You've given us some input already where that'll probably change. So, and we also haven't gone to the public yet to hear what they think or the current operators. So there's a lot of steps to go here. This was, again, one of the background issues we think we want to draw your attention to as we begin this process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, I'm not liking the direction that this is going in. The people in the rural area don't want zoning. And it was made very plain, I think, in letters that we sent when the province mandated this, that we didn't support it, and that it would be the very least amount of zoning, basically, that we could do to meet the obligation was what we would be doing. And I remember that direction being sent in a letter. And these may be the 3 big salvage yards out there, but I can tell you right now, there's an awful lot out there that might not be actual salvage yards, but it's like Keith says, they gather up junk and old cars and everything, and when the price of steel goes up and they have enough, the crusher comes in and crushes on that property for a day, 2 days, and they make a few dollars off it. So what's going to happen to those folks if you change the definition and you say this only applies to these licensed salvage yards? Then what are you going to do to these little guys? What kind of a zone are they going to have? What are they going to have to do? It's not going to be easy to put zoning in the unzoned areas. So I'm really hoping that our letter that will hopefully come later today to the provincial government asking them to reverse, rescind, or impose a moratorium on this is successful. Because if the people that live in my area want zoning, they'll let us know. We went out a few years ago just to the farming community to see what they thought about agricultural zoning. And I think they told us pretty loud and clear what they thought about it. And they didn't want it. So I know planning is in a difficult situation because right now the government directive is that we're going to have to do this. But I just don't see this being the right time to say it has to be by development agreement. I still think I need to know more what the overall plan is going to be for the area to know whether I think it needs to be by development agreement or not. But at the end of the day, you may be absolutely right. It may be something we want to regulate by development agreement, or there may be a specific zone that allows, maybe we'll have a rural salvage yard zone. I don't know. But anyway, those are my comments. I just don't want to get too far down the path of regulating before we have the basics in place. And anyway, I know planning staff would like to go skipping and singing, songs of joy because that's what planners do. But this is going to be a difficult process, and I just don't want to put the cart before the horse. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. And that's okay. I mean, so here's our background report on salvage yards. It's what we're aware of is out there and what, a policy direction we suggested. We can simply park this report now that, what we think and leave it until we get further through the process. As I guess zoning comes into focus, or, if it comes into focus, I guess, we can make a decision at that point and bring it back. So I guess our intent is still to bring these reports forward, let you know about the issues we think are out there, and whether they get parked or dealt with at this time. The process might take a little bit longer, but that's fine too.
I'm not gonna repeat what the warden has said. She said it would develop very eloquently. But I don't know, Mr. Chairman, you can stop me if I'm wrong. Or I'm out of line. But I'd like to know what the process is with this, because what's gonna happen with these meetings that are already scheduled, I don't really agree with. And you can stop me, but it has something to do with the yards and stuff and the planning. I don't agree with the process of having an open house for where people can drop by and la-di-da between 6 and 9. You're going into an area that people don't understand zoning. They have got, mostly if they have it all, they've got a very basic knowledge, and I would question that. And yet we're having an open house. The way I perceive this is going out there and having a meeting from 7 until 9. These are some of the things that's gonna happen when planning comes in. These are some of the things, you should be aware of, and what you should know if whatever zone you are gonna be considered in. Instead of, coming in, anytime between 6 to 9, that just don't sit right with me, and we're gonna take this one, I know we talked about this, John, and we're gonna take a few here, and we're gonna drop them over here, and then we're gonna put a few here and drop them over there. There'll be questions, and those questions, one person may ask questions, other people may benefit from those questions that are being asked. But if you do it the way that I am hearing that you're going to do this, I just to me, I don't think it's the right way to go, and for the people that are out there. So I'd like a little detail, if I may, Mr. You can stop me, a little detail on how this is all gonna flow down, because a review, because right now what I'm seeing, I'm not agreeing with.
Do you want-
Thanks, Mr. Chair. There's absolutely no perfect way to do public consultation, and there are all kinds of different tools and methods that you can use, and we're going to use several or intending to use several through this process. So already there's a survey that was out there, and we got over 400 responses, which is great. We have social media and our website we're using, posters, and so these workshops. It was a challenge to design them because we weren't sure what COVID restrictions would be in place at the time. So we tried to design an event where people could get all the information they want, and at the same time have people move through in smaller groups. So that's why it wasn't a general town hall meeting, but what we call a workshop. But it's a workshop where you have different stations so station 1, where I intended to be, would be that introduction to planning. What is planning? What is zoning? What is this project all about? What are your timelines, and so on. So I intended to do that, and then you could, if you wanted to talk about agricultural land, you could go to a station and do that. If you just wanted to learn about your property, so one of the things we're hoping at these sessions is that we've gone out and done a land use survey. I think that was in one of your background reports. And we want to make sure we got that right, so we know what's happening on people's properties now. So there will be a station where Tippy will be set up with her computer and have property information available, and the mapping on what we call our land use inventory, so people can look at their individual property and see what we think is happening there and tell us if that's correct or not. So we're doing this in 5 communities. I can't remember how many stations we have set up, half a dozen maybe, on different planning topics. And they're not all relevant to everybody. If you don't own a heritage home or if you don't own a farm, then those things aren't as relevant. And then following that, we intended to come back to you in November or December with a summary of everything we've heard so far from those sessions, from the survey, and I guess any other way people have communicated with us. And then at that point, I guess it'll be up to council to make a decision whether you want us to, right now in our draft plan that we had for consultation, we didn't intend to do another round of public consultation. until we have a set of draft documents. But you may change your mind. You may say, no, we've heard enough that we want you to go back out and ask these questions or deal with these issues, and we want them to be held in a town hall format. That's fine. Again, these changes always add a few months to a process, but you have to be comfortable with it, so that's fine. So we'll come back with that summary in November or December. Not quite sure when it'll be. I'm suspecting December, but we were hopeful. It could be earlier. And then, of course, there will be a final round of consultation, whenever that is, when we do have a set of draft documents. In addition, letters will go out to everybody who's proposed to get zoning or have zoning changed. And then, of course, there's the final adoption process where you hold a public hearing and advertising for that. So, these events are just one piece of a pretty broad public consultation effort.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd just add that to that further, is that the meetings were designed under stage 4 COVID protocols. And the reason why we went with the open house, we would have preferred to doing your method as well, like having an actual town hall meeting. But under stage 4, the facilities are only allowed to be at half capacity, and we would have to set up the seating at 6 feet apart, which reduces the capacity again. So we wanted to make sure that everybody would have an opportunity to come out to the meetings and be able to meet with staff. We didn't want to have to turn away somebody at the door by saying, sorry, the meeting is filled now and that we can't accommodate you. So this way, as the crowd moves through, more people can come in if we happen to get to that, have those capacity issues, that there's always going to be a movement throughout the process. And we'll make sure that everybody has an opportunity, like even at 9, if there's still people waiting, we'll stick around and talk to them as well.
All right, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that there is a motion in the executive that we do not go out until COVID protocols allow us to go out. Now, I'm pretty sure that was made a motion, or there was direction that we weren't until everybody could go out there. So why are we even having them now if we're not in the process? We're still in 4. And we could be in 4 with some of the outbreaks that's going on. So, I do believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that was the direction. And I liken this to the new math they're teaching today. Kids don't even know the timetables today in this new teaching method, and this is very similar. We don't even know the rules, but here's what's going to take place. Like, I just have a problem with it.
John?
So you're right, there is a motion, but it basically directs us not, I think, I don't have the wording in front of me, but to not do consultation until we can go out. So back in the spring, we couldn't. So again, we were trying to design a session where we could go to these communities. I don't think it was specific enough to say you can't do it unless you can hold a town hall meeting, and there are some other benefits I didn't talk about. I've found in the past where you hold town, sometimes some people are not comfortable speaking in front of a large group where they will in smaller groups or individually. So that was another thought that, well, it might be good to introduce planning this way. I guess also just thinking about the fact that we've been talking about this project since really the beginning of this year, and we haven't really gone out to the community yet, worried me a little bit that people are going to be hearing things in the background. So even if we have to do another round with a more formal sit-down meeting, I think it's important to get out there now and let people know this project is happening.
I guess I hope there's a realization out there that the buck stops in each district with the councillor, not with staff, right? Not with staff. The buck stops with the councillor, because councillor's going to wear. They're going to be fielding the phone calls. They're going to be dealing with the upset people. And the more information that we can give them right up front will help us tremendously than trying to, in my mind, walk them 2 or 3 through this station and 4 or 5 through this station. And it's to me, we're going to be the ones that are going to be taking the brunt of this. And in 4 years' time, we'll probably be getting a decision on whether we did the right thing or the wrong thing. Or 3 years now.
Counselors, I think it's important to note, and John has mentioned it, but there are different ways to engage the public. This is one of them. There is a report attached to your agenda, and council had looked at this engagement plan. I can't remember what date, Debbie, but it was brought forward as an engagement plan for this particular issue. Everything that we find out from the public is just good information to get from the public. So in an open house format, we've had them here in the lobby for different things. They're very easy for people to attend. They're not on a specific time schedule, and people get one-on-one time with planners. They can look at their own individual properties. They can ask pointed questions that they can't ask in an open meeting or wouldn't be comfortable asking in an open meeting. So as far as the format for the initial go out to the community, you can agree or disagree that it's the right way to do it. But we have seen that it's been effective in the past with trying to get information out to the public, but also get information from the public about how they're feeling about a particular, be it development agreement in the community, or we did them for the WCDD projects. Very easy for people to engage. But this is just one part of the process. So even the report that's in front of you today, if you completely disagree with standards for salvage yards, then that's what we need to hear. If you like the approach in general for salvage yards, that's what we need to hear. So then when we do the work of figuring out, okay, of all we've heard, what is the appropriate zoning for this district? You may have one big zone for the whole district. You may have 15. It's entirely up to you. The ball is in your court. Knowing how you feel about these things is what we need to go through so we can make those recommendations to you on the other end. If we don't ever hear anything from counselors when we bring these reports to you, then we're going to get to a point where we need to recommend zoning to you, and we're not going to know how you feel. Council as a whole. So we might know how an individual counselor feels, but we don't know how council feels. So we need to understand as we bring these reports to you, and there are going to be many of them, because what our staff are doing are going and looking at all the different elements of our current zoning and saying, what might these counselors want to weigh in on? So we need your feedback. Positive or negative, we don't care. We just need to know how you feel. We can't ignore the fact that salvage yards exist in the rural area because they exist in the zoned area. So if you have rules in the zoned area, do you want them in the currently unzoned area? That's the question we're asking. If you don't, that's fine. But you need to understand why we have them in the planned area now and what impact that's going to have on neighbors and businesses and whatnot in the currently unplanned area. So I don't think we can go through the next 18 months with a push and pull between staff and council. It is ultimately council's decision, but we're the professional that give you the information around planning. That's what John and his staff do. You don't have to accept their advice. If you feel you know your communities well and they wouldn't want this, then say so. And then when we're looking at different zone options, salvage yards won't be a part of it. They won't be required by development agreement. They just won't be part of it at all. Where the regulations are silent, they'll be permitted. So those are the kinds of things we need to know now from council in order to go through this process. Your public engagement, I personally believe that more public engagement, the better. But again, it's your community. If you really don't like the idea of a town hall or a drop-in, then we should know that and put something out different. But we do have to go out to the public and talk to them about this process, because if we don't tell them about it, they're going to make it up. And you can't control that message. So I think, we have to have some good conversations. It's not staff against council. We want to take this process for you. And we have to start it. So we've already started that ball rolling before the government changed, before this letter may or may not go based on your conversation later today. But we've already started the ball rolling before all that change happened. So we either stop the process and wear it, or we continue on with the process. And when things change, if the letter is accepted and this whole process is canceled by the provincial government, then we cancel the process. That's okay too.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can see how some of my fellow councillors would be kind of taken back by the approach, because it was my understanding that, like, the public consultation would be one public consultation. I think there might have been a little miscommunication here, right? I think if you engage the local councillors, this is going to affect, let them know the total communication plan up front. They can be your best supporters moving forward in adopting this type of plan. And I honestly believe that is possibly the key, because as Councillor Rhino said, the councillors in the on-planned area are going to wear this, and they already are. And if their understanding was the same as mine, I thought this was the only public consultation that was going to happen, that this was the one, and then it would come back. Because I went through this when we did Lakeshore Residential in my community. We had a table drop in, and that was it. There was never another meeting held. There was never anything else, and zoning was done. Right? So I can definitely see how my fellow councillors would be a little apprehensive, thinking that this was the only kick at the can. I do like hearing from the director that if these reports come and we really don't like it, we can park it for a second and then revisit it later, right? But some of this information, I think, would best be done to be identified up front, so we know coming in. Because as for us, when we read it and we get the information drop on a Friday of 70 items to get ready for a Tuesday, you don't have that background. So I know for me, hearing the discussion today, I look at this now as seeing this initial engagement as really a consultation of finding out what is out there. It's a fact-finding thing more than a presentation to the community. And from what I hear, presentations from the community will come later. Well, I think that would be a great thing to also have the input from the councillors in the area that will know the best method, number one, for delivery to the constituents, and how to get the information you need. Because each community is different, and how they interact and how they view things is completely different. So that's all I have right now. As far as the salvage yards go, there's still too much unknowns for me to say that we have to zone it or create a policy a certain way. I think once we have the zoning done, the biggest question that's going to come out in the end is going to be the fair and equitable treatment of a salvage yard in the municipality of East Hants. Is there one rule for all, or are we going to make 10 rules for 10 different ones? And that's a discussion that will have to come after we look at everything else. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the CAO had comments first, and then I can follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to bring to council's attention that back in April of this year, 2021, this consultation plan was brought to council for review. Since then, we've had an update on the consultation that's taken place within the community on 2 of your agendas. They have been posted at the bottom of the agenda for information on your executive committee agenda. I believe June and this month, there's another one on there. So I'm thinking perhaps we need to put that on your agenda as an item, so we keep folks up to date, so we understand where we're both going, because we had a plan that was presented to council. We understood that that was the engagement plan. And if council isn't on that same page, then we need to come back and have that conversation again, because that plan was established. We've gone out, we've spoken with developers, we've done surveys. There was a copy of the survey that was provided to councillors that was going out. It went out. We've, as John mentioned, we've had 400+ responses for that. So if this isn't the route you want to go, then we need to change the plan. But there was a formal plan put in front of council back in April on how we proceed with this.
Thank you. Having heard all of the discussion, as far as the salvage yard parts, to get back to the salvage yard thing again, I'm quite happy if we just park this report for now until we get a little further down the road, because now we know where staff are thinking and we know why, and that will help frame any decision we make when we get a little deeper into what's zoning going to look like. There's never too much information to have. At the end of the day, it may look like this and it may not, but, staff have prepared the report, and I don't think we should throw it out. I think we should just park it, have it on the side. With the consultation process, having heard the discussion, I don't have any objection to starting this way and going out and having folks come in and maybe just getting their toes wet and seeing what this is all about. We're not going to have a lot of answers for them yet because there aren't any answers. And even to the point of bringing your property up on a computer, we're not going to be able to tell them what zoning might look like on their property yet. We can say based on zoning that's in place in other parts of the municipality, but, no decision's been made. But at least, it will give folks that decide to come out to these events, they'll get their toes wet. They'll learn a little bit. And as long as we follow up with more formal meetings before we etch anything in stone, and it's not going to be easy, because I don't envy staff your job, because we don't want this. We're being dragged kicking and screaming into this, and but yet it is a provincial government directive, and unless that changes, and we can hope it does, but unless it changes, there's not a choice. So anyway, it is difficult. I don't mind going forward with these events with the understanding that these aren't going to be the only events. We're not going to come back after these and say, okay, this is what we're going to put in place. We'll be going back to the community. Hopefully, COVID will permit more formal, regular type meetings and discussions. So those are my comments. It would be, I'll even throw a motion out there that we receive the Salvage Yard report and park it for further discussion as we continue to look at future zoning in the unplanned area.
We have a mover, we have a seconder. Moved by Warden Rolston, seconded by Councilor Rhino. Any discussion on the motion? Questions been called. We'll go to the vote. And it is passed unanimously. Okay, next up we have Milford Groundwater Study Plan Update Background Information.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this doesn't relate to the future planned or the unplanned area of the municipality. It relates to the community of Milford. Over the last few years, municipalities heard several concerns voiced by residents of Milford in regards to sufficient quantity of drinking water and concern over how new development might impact the supply of drinking water. So following on from that, council saw merit in having a desk-based study completed for the Milford community, which could act as a resource for evaluating new developments in the community and assist council in deciding where new growth can occur. So this took away the requirement for the developers to prepare such a study, but also enabled a more comprehensive look at groundwater availability in Milford. And the study was completed in March of 2021. So the study included a desktop review of currently available data within the boundaries of the Milford Growth Management Area, and included mapping as required to help support findings. So the consultant was to identify groundwater supply issues for existing property owners, identified known water quality issues, and an estimate for the cost of treating water quality issues, and characterize the general availability of water in the community, including where water quantity and quality would provide challenges to existing and new residents, areas where water is plentiful and should be promoted for development, expected impacts to existing and potential future water supply, and recommend any further investigation or study as warranted. So there were some key findings in the study, and what the consultant found was that there was sufficient water supply to theoretically support an additional number of houses, and a very conservative estimate of 560 homes. And actually they said that that was probably an unreasonable assessment. They felt that a more reasonable assessment would be 1,900 homes for the growth management area of Milford. So as you can see, that's a significant potential for increase based on the supply of groundwater. Well interference. So this is where the consultant identified some issues. Most existing wells have been drilled to a relatively shallow average depth, perhaps because there was high yields encountered while drilling, so they didn't have the depth needed to store the water. Continued pumping of these wells over time may have altered the water table generally, and that might be why we've heard some comments by people within the community. Well interference is the cumulative pumping effects from all wells, and it can lower groundwater and water table levels. And it's the consultant suggested this is likely to be an issue moving forward with greater developments in the Milford Growth Management Area. That this is a potential issue for many communities, but we were looking specifically at Milford. And there were 3 scenarios developed for the community, and they were very hypothetical scenarios based on well log data and the geology of the area. And based on the scenarios, the consultant found that in a couple of locations, 15.5%, and then in a location, 39% of existing wells may not meet the drawdown requirements to support full development. So if the community develops fully, those percentages of wells wouldn't allow for sufficient water for those existing residents. There is a note to say that this is a hypothetical analysis. It was a desk-based study, and there was no test wells dug to assess that information and see whether that's accurate. And the consultant suggested there was a need for increased testing to see if growth is sustainable. Quality, the well water in this area tends to be moderate to hard. Water may have elevated iron or manganese, which can cause a bad taste in drinking water. And the consultant suggested that there are easy kind of treatments for those. A water softener was mentioned. Central water, the consultant looked at whether, if this is something the municipality wanted to investigate, that they felt that there was sufficient water capacity to enable a central water system, but that further studies would be needed if this is a direction that council wants to go down. So future investigation, there is a shortage of up-to-date pumping test data in the Milford GMA, which is needed to properly assess possible effects of well interference before more land development within the community can be completed. The consultant looked at 375 wells, I believe it was, and only 100 of those were accurate locations were provided for, and most of the data for the study was based on those 100 wells. So the groundwater report recommends a well pumping test program for wells located at key locations using existing wells or new purpose drilled wells. If the municipality chooses to undertake a pump test program, it would entail setting up test wells in strategic locations where development is proposed or expected. And there was a rudimentary calculation that staff did to look at what that might cost. And we looked at Nova Scotia Environment's recommendations for number of wells based on the number of dwelling units. And we estimated that it could be in the region of 94,000 up to almost 150,000 just based on the wells themselves. That doesn't include the analysis of the data and any additional work that needs to be done. So this would be the cost if the municipality decided to investigate further groundwater and well interference in the community. What staff are recommending is that one approach could be that a groundwater overlay zone be added to the community, which would require developers to complete hydrogeological studies showing the impacts the proposal would have on well interference in the area. And this would shift the onus of gathering further relevant data to determine impacts onto the developer. A recommended overlay zone for new development in the growth management area be prepared analysing well interference impacts, and such an overlay zone could require the following developments be considered for a development agreement. So staff looked at 4 residential four residential units or water intensive commercial uses. And this really is, I just based this on, there's some recent developments in Milford where there were 4 units proposed, and I felt that that was kind of a reasonable level between someone allowing for kind of a small development up to where it might start having an impact on local residents, but that's just staff suggestion on that number there. So staff acknowledge that this would put an additional cost and burden on developers. However, it would enable council to consider the impact of well interference with each application. And the study should be prepared by a professional such as a hydrogeologist. Staff are recommending that an open house be held in Milford, and this is in addition to the open houses that were mentioned in a previous staff report, but this would just be specifically related to this potential for additional policies and regulations on groundwater. The open house can also present findings of the study prepared by the consultant to the community, and it could be held late this year, early next year to enable feedback from the community to be reviewed prior to drafting policies and regulations. So the conclusions, the main intent of the groundwater study was understand if there was water capacity issues in Milford, and the study addressed this and is reassuring about the groundwater supply in Milford, but there is adequate water to support growth. And water quality issues were also addressed. The study recommends a water softener as the most effective method to treat household water needs. The study did, however, identify a potential for well interference, and that's due to the depth of existing wells in the community. So as at this time, the study's findings recommend against developing the Milford GMA fully without implementing some kind of pump test program or analysis of groundwater. If council wishes to develop such a program, this could be done through further study or through the development process. So the recommendation is that authorise staff to begin preparing amendments to the policies and regulations based on the direction staff report and organise an open house in the community. And just to note that we won't start developing any policies until we've heard from the community. This is just kind of a suggested approach to how to address the consultant's report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was part of the report about well within 100 meter interfering with each other's, or my question is, if someone drill a well just to get into water, is there any depth for ideal well, how deep you have to go?
Through Mr. Chair, it very much depends on the geology and the water, the groundwater. Each location is different from any others. So, and you could even have one, a little bit distance from another well, and the depth needed to provide that water could be different based on the geology.
Yeah, I understand that, but if someone like build a house like 50 years ago, and it's only like 10 meter deep or 15 meter deep, and his neighbor have to go like 20 or 30 or 40 and interfere with him. So that existing resident, if it's gonna interfere, he's gonna block everybody within 100 meter from using his own property for building, right? So I don't see that as a way to stop the growth. Like if your well is not deep enough, you could make it a little bit deeper so everybody can enjoy their property too. So we shouldn't be only on the resident that exists, but on the property that people own, and not stopping them from using it just because they interfere with one well that is not deep enough. So I don't know how we're gonna deal with that, but that could be a problem, right?
Through Mr. Chair, so the further work that we're suggesting developers look at would address that, like how much interference will that have around property owners, but not necessarily restricting property owners who want to develop their property, and looking at how that can happen or how that may happen without interfering around property owners around there that already have wells that could potentially be impacted by the development.
For now, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think where Councilor Moose is coming from, if somebody has a well that's 10 meters deep, surrounding areas have to go to 100 meters deep. Is that going to interfere with the guy with a 10-meter deep well? I mean, they could drain that. And I think that would certainly be a concern if that individual already had his well there. If they drill deeper and all of a sudden it drains his well, is this report going to deal with something like that, I wonder?
I think I'm just not understanding the question. The issue is that there is plenty of water, and when they drill the wells, the water's coming in at, I can't remember the exact wording now, the well yield. They identify how much water is coming in through that well. And then the driller then determines how deep that well needs to be based on that yield, but also how much storage you have. The issue is the storage area that they have in the well. So I guess I don't really understand.
If I was to drill a well right here,
Yeah.
5 meters deep, I get all kinds of water.
Yeah,
I get 5 wells drilled around me that's 50 meters deep. That may affect my well that
Yeah.
I have no water.
Yeah.
And I think that's a concern that people was going to have, and I'm just wondering if this report would address that.
yes, sorry, now I understand what
Okay.
you're
No,
asking.
I didn't explain myself, so I couldn't have.
So the report by the consultant, the developer's consultant will address that. They will look at how that impacts
Okay.
the wells in the area.
Okay. I'll move the recommended motion as presented.
Seconded by Alderman Baldwin.
It's just Councilor Ham, I knew what you were talking about there, Councilor. But anyway, so is the report, or do we know now, what is the shallow average well depth in that area? Or was that something that the report's gonna give us, or do we know that now?
I'm sorry, so the report we have right now from the consultant that we had prepared looked at all the different wells, existing wells in the area, and that they vary in depth. The report that the developer may prepare, I don't know exactly what their recommendations will be. We'll have to look at what kind of information makes sense to be provided in the developer's study. But there's some information out there from Nova Scotia Environment that asks about what should be included in a hydrogeological study looking at well interference.
So then, I guess what you're saying is we do not know the average shallow well depth right now.
We know the difference is, I'm just going to grab the report. So there is some information in the study that identifies the range of depths. Is that what you're asking for? What's there right now?
I mean, you talked about the shallow average well depth, so what is that? Is that something to report? Is it 100 feet? Is it 125 feet? What is it?
Well, but they vary in depth. Sorry, I'm just struggling to find the information. I think it might be in my staff report.
No, not to hold things up, but if you could, I'd just like to know what the average shallow well depth is in that area right now. The average is 80 feet and you get water, right? So that's all I need to know, not to hold things up.
There's a lot of information in here. I'm just looking through to see if I can find that for you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, yeah. Huh?
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Is there any more discussion on the motion? Questions from calls, we'll go to the vote. Passed unanimously. Next up, private roads. Background report for the plan update. Ready?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just gonna plug in here. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So staff have brought this back at their October 14th, 2020 meeting. So last year, Council directed planning staff to put the issue of private roads aside to be more fully considered through the next plan review or when brought forward by council prior to the plan review. And since we're in the update process, we've dusted it off and brought it back. So staff's background report will discuss what private roads are, where they are allowed, the positives and negatives of allowing private roads, and their socioeconomic issues, and propose a direction for the plan update. And I'm going to go over just some of what a private road is for councillors that might not be familiar with the subject. So a private road is defined by the subdivision bylaw as follows. A private road means any road which is not public where the design of the road has been reviewed by the municipality of East Sands pursuant to the Municipal Government Act. The road extends to and has access to a public street or highway. The road must be its own parcel and shall not be a right-of-way easement. And I made some crude drawings here to show what a private road is. So a private road is its own parcel, as indicated in the definition. So this here piece would be its own parcel, and each lot would have frontage off of that parcel that's created. So what we're not going to discuss in today's report, but if our planning advisory committee members would like, I could bring back background reports on each of these, are private shared driveways. And a private shared driveway is basically each of the lots have its own frontage along the public street. However, they share a driveway for access for each of those lots. And that's done for a variety of reasons. But again, I can do a different background report for that. And then a right-of-way easement is simply an easement across an existing area of land to access another piece of land. So there's no separate parcel or whatnot. It's just a right-of-way easement. And again, if you'd like to have another report, background report on right-of-way easements, I can do that as well. So private road. Private roads are permitted on lands outside of growth management areas and growth reserve areas. So the report impacts all councillors except for those who only have districts within growth management areas or growth reserve areas, with the exception of the regional commercial zone and the Elmsdale Village Core Zone. So in those areas, we allow for commercial development, such as the Sobeys property over there, to have private roads such as Mason's Lane to allow for their properties to be serviced. And the thing about these roads is any new roads, they have to be built to municipal standards for public roads. So although it's a private road, it's built to municipal standards for public roads. And that's for those people who have to set up leases and subdivide in accordance with certain financial provisions. So there are dozens of private roads in East Hants existing, and these roads have been developed at different points in the history of the municipality, so they're all in different conditions. So just some of the negatives about private roads. Maintenance, private roads are not upkept by the municipality or the province. It is the responsibility of the property owners who use the private road to maintain the road and to undertake major repairs. Costs, the cost to maintain and repair a private road comes from the property owner. Many property owners and private roads form private road associations where each property is charged a fee that goes toward the upkeep of the private road. Money is often collected by the municipality, but not necessarily all the time. So there could be private road associations that are not collected by the municipality. The largest fee collected by East Hants for a private road association from a property owner is $1,200, with the average fee for a property with a house being $433. So the waste collection is another issue, and I've talked to the manager of solid waste, and she's provided me with the information in the staff report. So there's 3 different types of collections on private roads: curbside collection, end of lane collection, and seasonal collection. Roads that receive either end of lane or seasonal collection typically have similar issues. Messes at collection points, which could be illegal dumping or could be residents putting out materials out late or on wrong days. Complaints of service type, so people not aware prior to moving to the road that there are different types of services. Complaints of road ownership, road association, or lack of association. Service issues, so for example, the collection staff do not service the road, typically due to limited or poor winter maintenance, or the turning area access is blocked so that they can't get their trucks turned around. And leaving collection points littered with materials. So again, cleaning torn bags of litter is not the scope of the work or the contractor. Other issues is liability, and I asked the municipal solicitor about this, and he indicated that if an accident were to occur on a private road, which related to the condition of the road, the owner of the private road may be liable. Some private road association owners may have liability insurance, but not all may have that. Conflict. So I did a lot of research online and asked fellow staff members to take calls about private roads, and they indicated that through much of the research that was conducted for this report, there was one common issue that came up, and that was conflict. And not all private road dwellers experience conflict. Some private road associations and private road homeowners have very nice arrangements, but some of the following are the conflicts that do occur. One property owner uses the road more than other property owners. Therefore, there's a feeling that the one property owner should pay more maintenance. For example, maybe somebody has an Airbnb that they're renting out, so there's constantly people coming and going. Strangers, these could be visitors of a private road owner, or simply someone who took a wrong turn, or someone looking to buy land. Or again, those are Airbnb people, so when somebody's unfamiliar, sometimes conflict can occur. Or when one private road property owner takes over enforcement of speed and parking into their own hands and has disagreements with their neighbors. Construction vehicles accessing a private road to build a house or an accessory structure and add extra wear and tear to the road or damage the road and may cause negative feelings and conflict between property owners. Emergency response. So emergency response vehicles may have a difficult time responding to emergencies on private roads if it's not well maintained or it's in need of major repair. And the final issue, open space. So public parks and open space should be located on public roads and not private roads. This ensures that there are no issues with who has the right to use a private road to access a public park. As well, it negates the issue of paying into road association for the upkeep and maintenance of the road or being partially liable for an accident were to occur on a private road due to the road conditions. So there are positives of private roads. So again, costs. It costs the developer less to develop a private road compared to a public road. And in some instances, those costs mean that the lot may be cheaper for the purchaser if located on a private road compared to a public road. Municipal costs, so East Hants does not maintain private roads, therefore, there are fewer kilometers of municipal roads to maintain. Although it should be noted that there is still a municipal cost in relation to private roads. The cost of municipal staff time to administer private road associations and the onboarding of new private road associations. And we do charge a 5% admin fee, as well as staff time in responding to complaints and inquiries regarding private roads. And then lifestyle is the final one. So some property owners choose to live on a private road because of the lifestyle choice it offers them. They like the idea of seclusion. So there was actually a research paper done in 2007 by Dr. Jill Grant and Leah Carson of Dalhousie University, and that looked at private roads in Halifax and East Hants, and it was called Privatizing the Fringe, the Design of Private Streets. Now this was a strictly an academic paper. So the research paper looked at the socio-spatial implications of private streets and noted that by building on private streets, residents seek to extend the private residential realm to the neighborhood level, distancing themselves from the public realm. The researchers noticed that private road quality is much more clearly linked to socioeconomic status than is the quality of public roads in Canada. In poor neighborhoods, private roads often have large potholes that show evidence of flooding. Some of the private lanes have poor access for fire service and face problems with people dumping wastes. So we've just brought this up because council may want to consider the socioeconomic issues, sociospatial conditions when considering private road development, so it might be just one of your considerations. Proposed direction. Based on planning staff's review of private roads, staff feel the use of private roads in the development of new communities is not reflective of good planning principles. The maintenance of those roads can cause undue financial hardship on property owners using the roads, and the quality of the road exacerbates class inequalities of East Hants residents. For these reasons, planning staff are recommending that the use of private roads in new development is prohibited throughout the municipality unless the new development is on a continuation of existing private road or through a rural comprehensive development district. So we understand that it costs a lot to bring a road up to public road standards, and we wouldn't want to stop somebody that already has an existing private road from being able to continue on that private road. And rural comprehensive development district, for those councillors that may not be aware of that, is an example of that is the villages of Long Lake. So that development agreement sets up the ability to have private roads and talks about what those private roads have to look like. Any changes to the private road regulations will impact all of the municipality, including lands in the future planned area of the municipality. Alternatives, so we recognize that Planning Advisory Committee may not agree with staff's proposed directions. So if they would like to continue to use private roads as a tool, we have developed two options, and this is for developers outside of growth management areas and growth reserve areas. And so the two alternatives is to maintain the current private road regulations as they are today, and to permit private roads to be considered by development agreement. And if Planning Advisory Committee has another option they would like us to review, we can do that as well. If council chooses option 2, staff will prepare detailed regulations as part of the East Hants community plan documents, and that would be part of the subdivision bylaw, and the subdivision bylaw is applicable to the entire municipality. So in conclusion, as per direction of council, planning staff are addressing the issue of private roads as part of the plan update. Staff have identified many issues with the development of private roads. One of the most difficult for residents of private roads is the cost of upkeep and maintenance of the road. Upkeep and maintenance fees may seem quite low at first, but they increase, and as the inflation is one of the reasons they increase, and then just as your road gets older, the costs of having to do replacement of culverts and stuff like that also increase. So in addition, development of new private road communities is not reflective of good planning principles, and the quality of the road exacerbates class inequalities of residents. For these reasons and other reasons identified in staff report, planning staff are recommending that new private roads are no longer permitted in the municipality except where noted. So that's the recommendation. However, the alternatives lay out all three of the alternatives. So through Mr. Chair, I guess I'm finished.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, between this report and the previous one, there's a 180-degree shift. And I remember in the previous one, the staff recommendation was different because it put more burden on the municipality to service like the public road. If we go with if we get away with the private road, it's going to put more burden on a municipality to service the private roads, right? That was in a previous report.
The private road standards, we're not proposing any changes to those, so even if you move forward with the private roads, like the private road standards, how they're actually constructed would still be the same. It's just whether you want to allow private roads and how you're allowing them, that's
Yeah,
what we're.
but like, you didn't get my question. If, in a previous report, staff recommended that we keep the private road because if we all build on public roads, it's gonna cost the municipality a lot of money to service those. It's gonna add like the inventory of public road on the municipality, and it's gonna cost money. That wasn't, I don't know if I'm wrong, but I remember that was in the previous report.
It's you, Mr. Chair, I'd have to go back and read. I know there was probably 7 different reports. But I don't recall that one, but I'd have to go back and confirm for sure.
It's okay, yeah, no problem. But how about if somebody have just 4 acres and he doesn't have the 450 feet that we need for public road? You cannot build a public road less than 450 feet. That's in our bylaw, right?
Through Mr. Chair, it's 150 meters, yes.
Yeah, 450. So if you don't have it, so you're not allowed to subdivide your lot into 4. Like if you have like 400 feet and you cannot build 450, is there going to be an exception for that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would, so first of all, you'd have to make sure that you ensure that you'd meet the minimum area requirements of, under the land use bylaw for wherever you're subdividing at. But there's other methods, as I said. You could use a private driveway if you had enough frontage. Or if it's an existing area of land, you can use an easement, and that only allows you to divide it in 2, so you wouldn't be able to get 4 lots, but.
Okay, as long there's, yeah.
So there are alternatives, but it just depends, it really comes down to how the lot is set up. And it makes it really hard to determine because each lot is configured differently. Some lots have lots of frontage, other lots don't have lots of frontage. Some lots are long and skinny, which allows for those private roads to be developed easy enough, yeah.
Okay. And when you I'm very familiar
Or for
with
public roads, sorry.
I'm very familiar with the cottage country development. So, is there a way to keep that trend going? Like if you have a main road and you could subdivide like 4 or 5 lots on a private road, is that can we keep that or?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm gonna have to ask Councilor Musa to repeat.
No, like you know how the cottage country they have a public road and many driveways, whatever you call. So if we get away with the private roads, that's going to be stopped automatically, right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's actually a rural comprehensive development district, which is regulated by a development agreement. So we're not talking about getting rid of rural comprehensive development districts. So Long Lake would be able to continue to develop as it is right now. And if somebody else came in and wanted to apply for a rural comprehensive development district, they could do so too, and they would be permitted, or council wouldn't necessarily be permitted, but council would consider private roads part of that application.
Okay, so that would be possible too to be.
Yes, yeah, it would be a council decision whether they permitted it through the rural comprehensive development district.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So looking at that development agreement and what you do, it requires the developer to be quite of a large scale in order for something like that to happen. Where some of the existing private roads were smaller scale developers, right? And it would allow them to develop their land and build little communities that in my area, I can say are very diverse communities. With the home sales the last couple of years, yeah, socioeconomic status is changing, but for many years it was a very diverse community. I'm a proponent for private roads. I can say that because in my area I get so many complaints about the public roads, especially the provincial roads and the potholes they have, and the people on them complain that the private roads are in better condition than the public roads. And I probably field at least 24 calls after every rainstorm or in the spring and the fall all the time of people complaining of the condition of a provincial road and some of the municipal roads, because when you have a private road, the road association is only concerned with that. They get their contractor, they come in, they fix it right away. Public roads require a planning process, and there's a pecking order, and it could be months and weeks before they get addressed because of equipment, workforce and work shortage and stuff. I believe a couple years ago, we made a private road standard that ensures that any new roads being built are built that allow access for service vehicles, that provide a good base and provide everything a longevity for the road. And I think that was good work by council making that standard. So it's not like it was 20, 30, 40 years ago when they took the scrubbings and made the road, and there are some roads out there that do require work and the people get it done. But I think if we get rid of private roads altogether, we are basically going to be turning over all development in East Hants to major developers, and you're going to take that person away that has 40 or 50 acres of a family land and wants to do a development either partially for their family and other people. They're not going to be able to afford to put a public road in, because the cost of a public road is even higher than building a private road to the municipal standards. Because a private road isn't as wide, it isn't as stuff. When you build a public road, it has to be done to a paving standard, right? And that is something that, for a lot of people, it just takes it out of their ball court. And I don't think we should be stopping the small developers, especially if we're looking to build out and have rural development. We need to let people have options. Not everybody is the Shaws or the Claytons of the world that can come in, take big chunks of land or the cottage country and do development. A lot of the rural is going to be built by small developments in little communities. And I think we have to ensure that we do have the regulations. And I want to tell staff, I'm really happy with what the work that was done to make that private road standard. And I think that allows for development to continue in the rural area in a good way, because most of the times for subdivisions, they're required to come in for a subdivision anyway. So it's there. And that's all I have right now. Thank you.
For you, Mr. Chair, just to let you know, there is, or for councillors that may not be aware, there is a standard for unpaved public roads. There is a standard for that. And for your, if Planning Advisory Committee would like to head in that direction, I'd suggest alternative motion number 2, which basically keeps it as the private road regulations as we have it today.
Just one more small question. When I know Montuniac is growing, and we're gonna have a lot public road, municipal road. Are we gonna keep doing, keep getting like TIR to fix our road, or are we gonna, at one point, we're gonna take over? Because TIR is not doing the right job. It's not, like sometimes their own road is like 3 days late, so. And every municipal road is gonna be like that. It's gonna be a nightmare for councilors. So if we're gonna go this way with the public roads, we're gonna move our gear and have some gear over there, because we're gonna have a lot of road on our shoulders.
I think.
If John wants to take that, that's fine. I was gonna make a comment about the service exchange that we have with the province, and if we're not happy with that service exchange, then council would need to make some budgetary decisions. John May.
That's what I was going to say. That's really a Jesse issue. He's the contact with transportation, and they do that every year. So, yeah.
Just watch on the big screen. I'm gonna look on camera.
Perfect. When it comes to maintenance, I think that's a big topic, and that is a topic that we should, maybe that's something that council would want a report requested on. If that's something that executive committee wanted to recommend to council, or if it came up in minutes from council next week, staff could put together some thoughts on overall public road maintenance. The historic stressors or the challenges for staff on maintaining roads in general is that municipal roads are spread out all over in small chunks. It's very hard to do a business case to mobilize and purchase gear when everything's so spread out, but still very small volumes of roads. And so that is the challenge from a staff perspective, and how we've looked at it is what would need to be true for us to create bundles that we could do maintenance effectively. That is something that we've put a lot of thought about in the background, and I would say that is a topic for a detailed discussion and overview that could happen at some point in the future, but as a standalone topic itself, apart from this discussion.
I'll move alternative motion number 2. Planning Advisory Committee recommends the council authorize staff to maintain the current private road regulations.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I can say this one is not related to the plan update, so that's probably good. So we did have a request from a resident in Enfield, Edward Canola, requesting that the municipality take action to eliminate that train whistle at the crossing on Highway 2. As he mentions in the letter, it's a council decision as to whether or not train whistle be eliminated or not, or to request. Transport Canada controls the process, and we would have to work with CN through their process. There, on the next slide, there's just a picture and the overhead showing the crossing. We did go through this in Shubenacadie a few years ago, it was very different context. So in that case, it was a small private road. This one is a provincial road across, it's a major road, I guess that's a big difference. So although we don't talk about it in the report, I'm not sure what the chances of success will be, even if we ask, but we'll just throw that out there. But if council does wish to proceed, there is quite a lengthy process that is outlined by the government. And it's there. I don't think I need to go through all of it, but it's basically it starts with that request from the resident. Then council decides if they want us to pursue it. If they do, we start talking to CN. And ultimately, that works its way up to Transport Canada, and they make a decision or whether or not it will be eliminated. And then if it does, it's supposed to be monitored and so on after the fact to see if removing the whistle works or not. So the options are simply to either recommend to council to proceed with the procedure for eliminating whistling at public grade crossings, and costs related to the procedure would be the responsibility of the municipality if there are whatever costs are incurred, or to recommend to council not to proceed with the elimination of that train whistle in Enfield and provide Mr. Canola a letter from council indicating their decision. So there are a couple of draft motions there to either proceed at this stage or to simply stop the process here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a topic quite close to my heart. I live on Canal Lane, which is just across from Shooters. So, I mean, the train whistle is just part of my life. And I'm wondering if there is an in-between stage from going to where they are now to eliminating it altogether. Like, typically it's 4 toots, and one of them is really long. I'm just wondering if maybe it can be 1 as it's approaching the crossing. I find that they do whistle while they are basically in the crossing, which seems redundant to me because it is for obvious reasons. the gentleman that you're speaking with, or who wrote the letter, is actually caught between the crossing in Enfield and the crossing at Halls Road, which is very close on the other side of the river. So I believe if they're whistling on that crossing as well, they're getting a double whammy right there. So that's kind of what I'm wondering, if it could be investigated as to whether the amount of whistles can be reduced. You know, if that's something that we can look at. I agree. The whistle is you definitely, it's definitely part of your life, and it comes at not very convenient times for people. And if you're right on the tracks, like some residents are, it is it does kind of affect your quality of life for sure. But I'm just wondering if there could be a happy medium without actually reducing it altogether. And also maybe if we can, a couple of things, if we can inquire to areas where they have reduced it or eliminated it, and how that worked for them. And also, if we were looking at eliminating it or making that request, if that should be something that other residents in the area should weigh in on from, it's obviously a safety point of view. That's why they're doing it. So there's a whole bunch of different directions I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question through to staff or the CEO. Would there be any liability to have this whistle eliminated if there's an accident at one of the crossings?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I wouldn't think so. I mean, ultimately, it's Transport Canada's decision. It's simply, a request through the municipality. So, I mean, we can check with our solicitor. I would suggest, yeah. So we would have to engage a professional, but I mean, there's, but it's still Transport Canada's decision at the end of the day. And then there is, in the last bullet there, it talks about an inspector may order the reinstatement if he doesn't feel that it is safe or that it's being monitored properly. So, yeah.
Was that a yes or no, John? Just to clarify what you're saying.
I wouldn't think so. Again, because it's not ultimately the municipality's decision. It's Transport Canada's decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering, how many times is this crossing used in a day? How many trains are rolling through on average? Do you guys have any of those stats?
No, through you, Mr. Chair, I don't know off the top of my head, but there are, a couple of container trains, usually a car train, maybe a VIA, so it's probably, the area councilor would probably know better, half a dozen maybe.
I'm going to say half a dozen, because
Half a
the going to the gypsum is going and then coming back twice a day, and a couple of more.
Yeah, I grew up with a train going 30 meters from behind my house, and it was about 12 times a day. It was almost every hour. You heard the whistle go because the school was right next door, and it was for safety. So having a family relative that was hit by a train because lights weren't working at the crossing, safety to me is a paramount thing. So it would really be bestowed upon Transport Canada to ensure that the safety mechanisms are there, because if those lights aren't working, that whistle is the only thing to give everybody a heads up a train is coming. So that's the safety concern that I have. But if Transport Canada is okay with it, then they'll automatically make the determination. But we all know how well a lot of this infrastructure has been maintained over the years, and that's a concern for me is understanding that if that equipment fails, especially looking at that picture, it's a busy crossing, and if it is on the back of subdivisions, children on bicycles with iPods in or whatever in their heads, they don't pay attention. It could be a concern, and I would hate to see any loss of life. But I'll wait and hear the rest of council's wishes. Thank you.
Thank you. I would tend to share some of Councillor Perry's concerns, because there have been an occasion or two in the not too distant past when we have had accidents on the train tracks. It's a tough one. train whistles are loud. They are. But when I look at number 8 there, I don't know if I'm as sure as John is about the liability thing, because it says the municipality and the railway company share the responsibility for monitoring and maintaining the conditions that support the cessation of train whistles. And if we share in the responsibility of monitoring that, then to me, it just makes sense that we would share in any liability if it were ever determined that more should have or could have been done. You know, if an accident ever happened and the Transport Canada guy came and said, oh no, it should have been done this way, yeah. Because it calls us the responsible authorities, and I don't know what monitoring and maintaining the conditions to make it safe without a whistle means. Does it mean the municipality is responsible to make sure that the gates and the lights are working? Do we share in that responsibility? What is that expense? So I understand, the folks that live there. It's a tough one, because there's a part of me, I'm sorry, that always wants to say, well, the train whistle was blowing when you built your house or you bought your house, because it was. And anyway, yeah, it's a tough one, but I would err on the side of safety. I would be concerned about liability should anything happen, and I would be concerned about what level of expense and maintenance the municipality would be involved in were we successful in petitioning them to remove a train whistle. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think there's a few points in here that, again, the question on liability comes up, and bullet number 4 suggests municipality would have to engage a professional engineer to make the determination. Unless we have professional trained scientists on staff that I'm not aware of, even starting at step number 2, I think the municipality would do well to engage in someone who understands the science in talking to the railway about the feasibility of taking this whistle out. It uses language like in number 3, that you'd pass a resolution declaring that you as a council agrees that the whistle should not be used. Well, you're not going to do that without professional advice, I would hope. And that's not going to come from anyone we currently have on staff. So this can be done, but the liability would have to be put on a professional who understands the science of train whistles and public safety. And that's no one in this room at this point in time. So enter into the process or not, but it will come at a cost of at least hiring somebody with that level of expertise, because I'm not prepared to give you advice on whether you should or shouldn't stop a train whistle.
What's the background? Is the complainant new to the area? Has the person lived in the area for quite a while? And is there any reason that, they may be asking for this, a sick family member or something like that? What's the background on it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't think he says so. It's just a request because it's a nuisance.
So how do we know how long the complainant has been a resident of the area?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm just gonna have to go back to his letter here. Debbie, can you bring that up? Thanks.
He's been a resident since 1974? That's quite a few years that he's waiting all this time to mention the train whistle, so, yeah, that strikes me as a little, I just thought there would be a reason, like a sick family member or something, but I guess I would err on the same as the word, err on the side of caution, like, we wouldn't want to get to see anybody with that traffic that's on that road get hit, so, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From the person's perspective, from the people's perspective who live close to the tracks, whether they're new to the tracks or they've lived there for a long time, I think it's kind of a matter of you talk about amongst yourselves but maybe he never got around to lodging a formal complaint until now. But to eliminate it altogether, even though I'm someone who is affected by it, I wouldn't really recommend that. I think people's main complaint over the years has been that they feel that they blow it excessively. And if there was some way to, to reach a happy medium, I think that would be great. To eliminate it altogether might not be wise, but I do agree that the excessive blowing is a legitimate concern. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just know from the past, their engineer, he said that's a sharp turn coming into the crossing. They're always scared when they come around there, he says. You never know what they're going to come in the infield. And that was at 74. There was a bus that was hit there, that Don Acadian Long bus. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I imagine as a resident, this summer would have been even more interruptive because there was a strike in Montreal at the container terminal. And a lot of that traffic got diverted to Halifax. And they had more traffic this year than they've ever had. My neighbor is the HR guy for there, and they were working flat out. So there would have been a lot more traffic this year than most years, and it probably did play a role in his letter where he says up 25%. Yeah, it definitely would have played a role because there was some union strife at the port in Montreal. I agree with Councillor Garden-Cole. I said, maybe if there is a way to see if, I would imagine there's protocols for how the horn must be done, and I wonder if there's more than one protocol. There could be a protocol for a provincial crossing, there could be a protocol for a rural crossing. I would be interested to see or be able to find out if there is different, what do you call them, toots for different crossings, and if there is a different way to still provide notice, but not at such the volume that it currently is. Thank you.
Thank you. Would it be possible that we could forward this letter on to CN and just simply tell them we've received this letter from a resident, a concerned resident, and while we are not at this time requesting the cessation of the whistle completely due to safety reasons, and just inquire if there's any possibility in changing the length of the whistle or the pattern of the whistle as it crosses this crossing, if there's any possibility of a process that would do that. And that's the only way we're going to know if we ask them, because I certainly wouldn't support probably eliminating it, but if there was an adjustment that could be made, we could.
Is that a motion, Warden?
Yes. I move that we forward the correspondence to CN. Oh, okay, sorry.
No.
I move that we forward this correspondence to CN and indicate that we have received it from a concerned resident. And while we are not at this time following the process to ask for the whistle to be stopped completely, we would like to know if there's any possibility of an adjusted pattern or length of whistle blowing that might be appropriate for this crossing.
You have a seconder. Seconded by public member Balcom. Are you looking to speak there, Sam? No.
Yeah, it just popped into my head. If we're gonna do that for one crossing, maybe we should include all crossings in East Hants. Because as soon as if gets adopted here, other people's gonna be saying, well, why didn't you do it here? Why didn't you do it there? But that's just a thought that went into my head, but I don't know whether we wanna add that to it or not. Thank you.
There might be more traffic or less traffic at some crossings than others and might require, but I think this will let us find out if there's even a process that could do this. And if there's a process that could do this, then if we get more requests, we know what process to follow to request that the pattern be changed. So I just see every crossing as different and having perhaps its own risks and its own challenges. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Shawbrick Road naming. So the Nova Scotia Department of Public Works is taking over a portion of the entrance to the Shawbrick plant as part of a new roundabout project off of Highway 2 in Lance, which is to be completed in November of 2021. So you can see on the map to the right, the approximate location of the new connector road there, the approximate location of the roundabout, and the location of the proposed clay brick way. So the new provincial road requires naming, subject to the petition process outlined in the civic addressing bylaw and the Nova Scotia Department of Public Works road naming procedure. Staff have petitioned the 3 property owners adjacent to the new provincial road for a road name, and all have voted in favor of Clay Brick Way. The civic addressing coordinator has reviewed the proposed name and confirmed that it meets the public street and private road naming guidelines in the bylaw, and that it is not an existing name in the immediate surrounding area nor the municipality as a whole. So the next step is just for municipal council to approve the name and request that Public Works approve and implement the name. So that is the recommendation that PAC recommend to council to approve the proposed provincial road name Clay Brick Way for the entrance of the Shawbrick plant off of the Highway 2 Lance, and direct staff to request road name approval and implementation from Nova Scotia Department of Public Works.
Make the motion, Counselor.
I move recommendation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Question. Further discussion on the motion. Don't vote the question.
You asked for the question.
I said any, no, I said any discussion. Question called, go to the vote. Just like Carol Rancho, anybody watching this here, I'll marry the woman in contact. And the motion is passed unanimously. And that concludes the business of PAC. We are now scheduled for a 10-minute break, and we will return to corporate residential services at 3:25. Motion adjourned.
So move.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. it'll be done with Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff have prepared the attached report. Yes, now up on the screen now, in regards to the tax sale process. So as council is aware, we have deferred or delayed the tax sale process that would have normally occurred in June to the following year. In response to that, we have a section of the Municipal Government Act, Section 134, that relates to tax sale that we need to maintain compliance with. There are 7 accounts as listed in the report that have taxes owing greater than 3 years. And in order to maintain compliance, staff is seeking approval from council to defer the tax sale process on those 7 accounts for an additional year to be included in next year's tax sale, which would happen in June of 2022. And that is basically what the report is for. Yeah. So with that, we're staff is seeking approval on the recommended motion.
Thank you so much. Councilor Mitchell.
Yeah, just a quick question through the staff. Any chances any of those taxes will be paid over the next year?
There's always the chance that they will be paid. Obviously, we work with our collection officer quite closely to try and get those paid. We don't have any indications that the ones that are listed here will be paid prior to tax sale, but it is always top of mind to try and get those paid before the tax sale process begins. We do know that one of those residents has deceased, so it is unlikely that those will be recovered, but the other accounts we will continue to try for.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Warden.
Yes, thank you. The only concern I have is that many times when properties go to tax sale, then at the very last minute, the owner, somehow manages to pull it from the thing. And the longer we go without sending it to tax sale, the more interest that's accruing, and the ability to do that will be somewhat decreased because they'll owe so much more on it. I guess they have the option of paying it at any time, but a lot of times, they don't do it until the very last minute when they've, already accumulated significant fees and interest. But I guess the only other option would be to hold the tax sale by an alternative method, which we could do, but it's 7 properties, so, if we weren't able to have a tax sale in June, I think we should really look at doing it a different way. I wouldn't want to extend it any longer than that, but thank you.
So, we're looking for the motion. Councilor Green.
I'll move the recommended motion.
Moved by Councilor Green, second by Councilor Hebb. Is there any discussion towards the motion? Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. The votes are in and it's passed unanimously. Next item on the agenda is the tax and water collection, council policy. Again with Andrew. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The attached report, yes, up on the screen now, is in reference to the recognition of the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. In response to that, we are looking to amend the current tax and water collection policy to move the due date for the final tax bill from September 30th to October 1st. And with that, staff are looking for the recommended motion to be approved.
Councilor Mitchell.
I'll move the recommended motion.
Moved by Councilor Mitchell, second by Councilor Green. Any discussion on the motion? Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. And the vote is passed unanimously. Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. Next up will be Records and Information Management Council Policy Update with the CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This report is coming to you from Corporate Services. They were the preparer of the report, but information management is ultimately a CAO responsibility, and where Kate is going to be leaving us by the end of next week, I thought that I should probably present this to council today. Just for full disclosure, 99.9% of the work has been done by Amanda. She's our information management resource in the organization. And we work very closely with her to make sure that our policies and procedures for information management are up to date. So in front of you today, council, we've had an old records management policy that was very cursory, I guess, approved by council. It's attached to the agenda for your information. Since that policy's been in place, we have taken on information management and management of our records in a whole new way. Also attached to the agenda, you will see what we call our Records and Information Management Manual. So as you can see, this document has a lot of information with respect to how we manage records, the classification system that we use now to manage these records, how we destruct records. So we have a process in place for records destruction that is the subject of your policy that's in front of you today. And essentially, the new policy that's being recommended today basically outlines that council has adopted a system to manage their records. The old policy referred to the Association of Municipal Administrators system. We have taken that system and sort of East Hants-sized it, I guess, and made it more flexible for our use and for records that we know that council, how council would want to deal with them. So instead of saying that we use the AMA system, it's a customized version of the Association of Municipal Administrators system is what we've adopted. From time to time, we update our system as new things, as new types of records get created in the organization, or as legislation changes, which requires us to keep records for different amounts of time, that would be updated. The policy is also intended to make sure that we are, so we take every record that we create, we record it, we classify it, and then we manage it based on a disposition schedule. So if that says that we keep it 1 year plus 7 years, or it has a whole archiving strategy with it, that's what our manual would do. Not typically something that council would want to get involved in that minutia, but that is what this policy would give the CAO the authorization to manage that classification and disposition records. The process in place is once a record goes through its cycle, it gets reviewed by the department. The director for that department would sign off on the record, and then it would come to me for final authorization of destruction. Once we have that list prepared, we keep a record of that, so we know if a record's been disposed of. And then that information forms part of our information management historical data. So that really is the intent of the policy. The policy that it replaces is also been posted. As you can see, it was very simple, but it had a lot of the detail in it, where that detail now rests in that manual that has been created. So there is a recommendation to that council give notice of the intent to approve the records and information management policy to replace your current destruction of documents policy as it's attached to the agenda here today.
Thank you, CAO. There you go.
I
Warden.
would move the recommendation.
Moved by Warden Rolston, second by Counselor Mitchell. Do we have any discussion on the topic? Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. All the votes are in, and it's passed unanimously. Next up, DAR Adjacent Property Owners Meeting Feedback with Kate. This will be her second last presentation. Have you guys both signed off on that yet?
The main reason you retire when you're my age is the technology.
The gavel worked last time. There we are.
So how is everybody today? I could sing a song, I could tell a joke. There we go. It's coming. There we go. I have to say, my technological skills have drastically improved since coming to East Hants. It's taken me 7 years. But the one thing they've never been able to do is get me to use Excel. I will retire without having to. I did take training. So just this report is a summary of the September 14th meeting we held in the community in Kennecott. It was an invitation meeting to the adjacent property owners that live along the DAR line. And it was geared to hear the comments from the community related to their concerns and ideas as it would pertain to the potential development of a trail system along the rail bed. Just in summary, we sent out in mid-August approximately 300 letters to property owners. As indicated, there were some duplicates due to multiple property holdings. About 36 individuals attended, some sitting as members of families, and certainly I think it was a fairly well-represented group of those who we had heard from. Some we had heard from before at the meeting in 2016, and then I think it was actually a good way to hear specifically some of their concerns. In general, there were several main themes, and they're listed there in the report. Questioning the process and the validity of the rail bed acquisition, which was a big one that evening. Concern around taxes having been paid to the municipality on the rail bed portion of their property, and then getting more into comments about use of the existing bed right now by the ATV community and commenting on their behaviors. And certainly there were some comments about how wonderful it was to have this asset in their adjacent to their property so they could access it for their own purposes. So I think it was a very fruitful discussion, useful discussion. A number of you were in attendance and heard their comments. We are in the process of researching some of their concerns as it relates to the questions that were raised, particularly around the validity of the rail bed acquisition, old deeds, looking at tax payments on rail bed portion of property, et cetera. And certainly I did make the public comment that we would get, or I said I would, but I guess it's somebody else now that would get back to them once we have some of that information. We did a straw vote at the end of the meeting with show of hands and preference of the project, and it was split approximately 50-50. And this report really is shared with council for information, or with committee for information. So if there's any further questions, there's no recommended motion. It really was just to summarize what happened at the meeting, particularly for those who weren't able to make it. So.
Councillor Rhino.
I'd just like to say, Kate, through you, Kate, you did a good job at that meeting, facilitating that. I mean, the questions, you were very honest. You couldn't answer them, but you'd say you get back to them. So I just want to say thank you for doing that. And I think the biggest thing that come out of that night was how is the validity of that quit claim deed. That's what I got. So, and rightly so. So I don't know how we could get around, to try to nail that down, but it would be interesting, like how on one side of the river the dude did that, or compared to the other. So. Is there any way, do you have any ideas how you could search or do anything?
Well, certainly, it does take time through property online and through the ability to search the records. There is a different level of acquisition that our legal service is able to provide to us, and that Mark Dunning is in the process of doing that right now.
Okay.
At the staff level, with our level of ability to use property online, we only get so far into the system, and then we have to rely on the services of the legal system. The there's I think a lot of I think there's some misinformation, but I also think we need to find out exactly what has happened and transpired, and we'll get that clarity over the next month. Probably will take about a month for us to get some of that information, and we'll report back to you as part of your due diligence for looking at the acquisition. The other thing we're also examining right now is some of the agreements that are in place by Landar with the line. So if anybody has an agreement with Landar for use of that line in any way, shape, or form, we're tracking that down as well. So we're getting a lot of information right now for you.
So there is a process in which to validate some of that concern by that one person about paying taxes on. Is there any way that we can answer that question, put that to bed?
We can answer that one too, yeah.
Yeah, because that seemed, I'd like to get an answer for that.
Yeah.
Because I can't see that ever happening, but, it may so.
As I say, I think there's a fair bit of family history that gets translated from generation to generation. But we have the ability to dig deep into some of that information.
Very good. Thank you.
Councillor Head.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The land we have at South Maitland at the observatory deck there, is there? I'm assuming there's a lease in place for that.
That's right.
Is that a short-term lease or long-term lease, or? I'm kind of putting you on the spot.
I'm having to go from memory. It would be probably a 5-year lease.
5-year lease, okay.
Renewed. I know in my time here it's been renewed once. So,
okay.
But I'm sorry, I can't give you the
no,
length of time.
and I'm the same as you. I knew there was a release, at least made up, but I wasn't aware. I didn't know how long it would be. But that sounds more in line to what they would approve. I couldn't see them approving a long-term lease and something like that. So, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Warden.
Yes, I'm sure that staff are researching it all, but I found it interesting that on the maps, every place the rail line crossed the provincial road, so there was a note and a cross-section hatched out saying that that piece of land was to be turned over to transportation. I forget what it was called at the time, but Department of
Department of
Transportation.
Transportation, DOT.
So, I mean, that's something, that has to be researched as well.
Sure. And that's part of why we want to look at the records that are there, that Landar is making available to us to look at, so that we can understand what agreements are all in place.
So I suspect that was probably back when the province got involved, when they were thinking of a pipeline. That's probably some stipulation that was given to Landar, but that's just a guess.
Don't know. We'd have to find out.
Is that everything, Warden?
Yeah.
All right. Seeing nobody else to speak, I'll turn it over to the Warden. Thank you, Kate, and to echo what Councilor Rano says, I was at that meeting and it was full of a lot of passionate people on all sides. I think you did very well of navigating and ensuring that everybody had the ability to feel and understand that they were heard by municipality at the time. There were some very interesting conversations, and the validity of some of those arguments is what we're going to look into. One of the things that struck me at the meeting was the deep feeling that some of these landowners have, whether it's legal or not, about their land being, to quote them, stolen, right? So that is something that I think council should be aware of, right? For those who weren't there, like some of these people vividly believe that their land was stolen from them. Whether it was or not, that's what we're going to find out. But that's what some of the feelings of some of these people are. And I'm glad to hear that, there's some answers and stuff coming. But it's definitely something it's in the report, but it's not in the report. But there was more than, I will say, there was at least 5 to 6 families that had that exact comment out of the 36. And out of the 36, there was probably, 10 families there. So about 50% had that feeling. So I just thought it was important that the rest of council that wasn't there understands that feeling is there, whether it's justified or not, but it's still there. Anyways, thank you.
Just to add to that some of those folks, even if I understood them correctly, felt that even if by some what they considered sleight of hand or whatever, the property had been taken and then deeded to Landar instead of coming back, I think a lot of those folks felt ethically that it was their land. And I did hear more than one comment saying, how can the municipality even consider buying this land when they know it shouldn't really belong to Landar? And I think they just, as Councillor Perry has said, they have some pretty strong feelings on it. So going to be interesting discussions, and I look forward to what staff and legal can find out about the whole situation. Thank you.
Councillor Head.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just something else to add to that is too that, this is, Landar has had this for several number of years, but to my knowledge, nobody has ever tried to go to Landar and ask what happened or try to buy it back. And it just seems now that the municipality is looking into it, and it kind of get the impression from a couple that spoke that they was kind of waiting for the municipality. Maybe they'd do all their work for them. They wouldn't have to go and do it. So, if this was so important to them, and which it is, I fully agree it is important to them, but nobody step up to say that they tried to get it back. So I don't know. There was one person that said that, but I guess that was his father that tried to get it back, I believe. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Kate. I don't see anybody else here on the schedule here to speak on this topic, so we'll end the DAR and we'll go to 34.5 as it's written here, and the amendment to the agenda. And Warden, the floor is yours.
Yes, with the recent change in government, hope springs eternal. And as we know, the previous government mandated mandatory zoning in all parts of all municipalities in the province. This was not done at the request of municipalities. Municipalities have always had the ability to zone where they felt it needed or appropriate. It was not done in a consultative manner, in my opinion. It was an add-on to a meeting that was held for an entirely different purpose. I think it was shoreline erosion or something. And then it was just a sub-thing to that meeting. So there were very few, very, very few counselors even at what passed for public consultation with municipalities. And I do believe that we wrote a letter, at least one. You know, we were supposed to.
Mr. Chair, we looked and couldn't find a
I
letter.
remember that meeting. I do. But anyway, that's okay. It's certainly, I'll have to go. I remember that. But anyway, yes. There was supposed to be a letter sent saying that we objected and there should be more public consultation. But in any case, someone else is nodding that they remember it too, so. Yeah. So in any case, the government has now changed. And as I said, hope springs eternal. So we do perhaps have some opportunity to rescind this provincial decision. So I would move that we write a letter to the provincial government, copying the Premier, copying the Minister of Municipal Affairs, and copying all 3 MLAs who now have responsibility for parts of East Hants, stating that we were never in agreement with this mandate, that we don't feel adequate consultation was done, and that given that municipalities have always had the ability to zone where they deemed appropriate, requesting that this motion towards mandatory zoning be either rescinded or at the very least a moratorium put on its implementation until such time as true, real consultation with rural municipalities can take place. In addition to that, I think we should copy all members of NSFM.
Okay, we have motion, we have a seconder. Is there any discussion on that? Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. Votes are in. It's passed unanimously. And I do believe the only consultation that happened was with CBRM and HRM on that topic. All right, that brings us to an in-camera land issue. So I will ask that we do the necessary things to move into camera.
I would move in camera.
Oh. Motion to go into camera. So move. We have a seconder? Seconder by Councilor Mitchell. All those in favor? Aye. Pardon me? Leaving it in camera. Yes. I'll just say a land issue. All right, thank you. Like to report that we met in camera over a land issue and direction has been given. All right, now that brings us to the end of Corporate Residential Services Committee, so I'll be looking for a motion to adjourn. Just a heads up to councilors, we will be having a policy meeting following today, so I'll look for a motion to adjourn and head into policy. Moved by Councilor Mitchell, seconded by Councilor Rhino. All those in favor? Aye.
I think it was Councilor Hibb seconded that. Councilor Rhino looks quite shocked.
Okay, folks, do you want a short break before we go into council, or?
I gotta
No?
grab my papers.
Okay. Are we ready to go, Shirley? Okay. I would call this regular meeting of council to order. The first item is the land acknowledgement, and I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki and the district of Sabaganagadi, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. On the agenda today, we have an item coming forward from Corporate and Residential Services Committee. Over to you, Councillor Perry, as Vice Chair of that committee.
The committee held its regular meeting on September 21st, 2021 in council chambers. The following motion is coming forward as a result of the meeting. Record and Information Management Policy. The Corporate and Residential Service Committee recommend to council that council give notice of intent to approve the Record and Information Management Policy to replace the current Destruction of Documents Policy as attached to the Executive Committee agenda dated September 21st, 2021. As Vice Chair of the committee, I so move.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded by Councillor Green. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Question.
Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. And the vote is in, and the motion has passed unanimously.
Okay. The second item, Tax and Water Collection Policy. The Corporate Residential Service Committee recommend to council give notice of intent to approve the changes to the Tax and Water Collection Council policy as attached to the Executive Committee agenda dated September 21st, 2021. As Vice Chair of the committee, I so move.
Moved and seconded by Councillor Musa. Is there any discussion on the motion? The question's been called. We'll go to the vote. And the motion has passed unanimously.
As Vice Chair of the committee, I move the adoption of this report.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary? Motion is carried. Next item on the agenda is over to you, Councillor Rhino, for a report from Parks, Recreation, and Culture.
Committee held its regular meeting on September 21st, 2021 in council chambers. The following motions coming forward as a result of the meeting. Park naming policy. The Parks, Recreation, and Culture Committee recommends to council. The council give notice of intent to approve the park naming policy as attached to the September 21st, 2021 Executive Committee agenda. As Chair of the committee, I do so move.
Seconded.
Moved by Councillor Rhino, seconded by Councillor Hibb. Is there any discussion?
Question.
Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. And the motion has passed unanimously. So that concludes the business
Oh,
on
as
the...
Chair of the committee, I move the adoption of this report.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Contrary, motion is carried. That concludes the business for this meeting of council around policy, so I would be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Green, seconded by Councillor Musa. All those in favor? Contrary, motion is carried.